Facebook fail. Ah, but it hasn't failed. It's just gone straight up live. We're in the live zone. I always kind of want to wait a little bit. I'm going to wait a little bit. There's a little awkward delay. I don't mind. And then I can mute this. Great. It's working. It's saying stuff in my ear. I can see the little closed captioning that Facebook provides for me. I'm going to do the live pouring. This is the tea that you all came to see poured. Today, what we are drinking, oh, I'm just spilling it on the floor in my white pants. I can wear white pants for about 30 minutes and then they inevitably have something on them staining them. And I've already made true that prophecy by spilling decaffeinated orange pekoe tea. Orange pekoe? It's a funny one to pronounce. So let's have a sip together to christen this Friday. It tastes like orange pekoe, but without caffeine. And if you've spilled some tea on your pants, we want to hear from you. We could make this a call-in show. Who spills tea on their pants when they're pouring tea? I'd like to know that I'm not alone in the world. That would be a nice feeling. Okay, well, we've got special celebrity guest Ruth Arnott here today. She's going to come on in a little bit. It's going to be cool. We're going to talk about her journey of the transformation, leadership. We'll probably talk about like some of the challenges and difficulties and why breakthroughs are challenging and why we're not just creating transformation all the time. And part of my hope there is it's not that I want to create in people the impression that like this has to be hard work, because it doesn't. But I think what I notice we humans do, hey Andrew, it's nice to see you, brother. What I notice we humans do is we really discount all of the work that we put into getting ourselves here today, all of the work we put in to create the patterns that we currently have. We are very dismissive, very irreverent with that about ourselves. And so we sort of hold it like, oh, I don't know why I'm afraid of this. I just need to do this. And then I started doing it and now the habits changed. I just had to do something different for 21 days. And that's almost certainly not usually the way it goes. And as a result, because we're so dismissive, because we're just like, oh, it should be really easy, I should just be able to fix it, we end up kind of disillusioned when it doesn't go that way, frustrated with ourselves, resigned, like it'll never change, so I just need to be okay with things being the way they are. That's resignation, and a whole host of other things. And so my hope in you hearing some of Ruth's story and her journey is that you really get like, oh wow, we're moving a lot of stuff. Anytime we want to create transformation, that's no easy feat. And if you want to see an example of that in the world, climate change is a great one. You know, intellectually, almost all of us recognize, most of us, you know, some people are in denial and that's their journey. But the rest of us that are not, that are clear that this is an issue, we're like, we need to change this. And then we go on Amazon and we buy a bunch of stuff. We're like, we really need to change this. And then we keep eating red meat. Or we need to change this. And then we just keep using toothpaste out of the tube. Those tubes, we throw them out all the time. And so this isn't to cast blame. In fact, my invitation here is to use this as a way of having compassion. It's hard to change this stuff. It's not as easy as just intellectually knowing it. And so that's what I'm hoping we're going to give you a bit of a taste of today. Oh, good. We've got the call-in show is live. Daniel says he's finishing up a fast, so no tea this week. Well, what have you spilled on your pants? If you've not spilled anything on your pants during a fast, I think you've failed at your fast. Why don't you share what kind of fast it is too, Daniel? Be interested to know. And Tommy Price says, good morning. I spill on my shirt most of the time. Gave up on white a long time ago. I could go in a clean room and leave with something on the white. Yes, me too. I really like white. I like the crispness. I like the you could almost say like the sacredness of it, the virginal quality, the purity of it. But I'm always, it's a joke in our house, like, as soon as she does laundry, there's like a white shirt in the laundry to be cleaned again, because I just can't help it. So I have a lot of white shirts that I cycle through. I have two pairs of, I like white pants, and I have two pairs of the same kind of pants. Normally I don't like to do that because it's a bit wasteful, but I knew as soon as I bought these pants, I was like, I'm going to just trash them, knowing me. Daniel, you're saying today it's just fruits and veggies. So you're cleansing fruit. You're able to eat fruits and veggies, but no tea. What bizarre fast is this, where you can have fruits and veggies, but not tea? That was very mysterious. I think tea has got to be cleaner than tea without caffeine. What if What if you drop a fruit in hot water and then drink the fruit or drink the water? Would that be okay? This is something I'm wondering. Would that work for your fast? Because that would be tea, I think, I believe. Or they have a different name for that. Anyhow, I'm fresh back from ceremony, y'all. Bay and I were working in Costa Rica, myself teaching plant integration between the nights of ceremony, and Bay working in the Maloka, the sacred space, supporting people in their journey, doing her own work with the medicine, all of that sort of stuff. So when we go down to work, we usually also receive the medicine, ayahuasca, we drink it, and then support people through their journey. And so the prior to going down to ceremony this past week, I think some of what I'd shared was like I was coming back off of time off, coming back away from being off for all of June. So I talked a little bit about disillusionment. And the other thing that was really live for me was excuse me, like what I'll call like my gluttony. I really noticed how much I was consuming, how much I was stimulating myself. So I was eating a lot, I was playing a lot of video games, I was watching a lot of TV. I work with a plant medicine called rapé, which is a tobacco and other sacred herbs. I was doing a lot of that, like just anything I could get my hands on. I was just devouring like a wood chipper, devouring candy, M&Ms, score bar, all of it. And so I brought that with me to the medicine this week. I brought to ceremony like, boy, I'd really like to get a handle on my gluttony. And before I go any further into that, I want to share like one other thing, which is that I don't look necessarily like a guy who struggles with a lot of, well, I wouldn't say struggles, but like has gluttony as part of his story. You know, like I'm not overweight. I'm not like obese or anything like that. And yet this thing is there. And the reason that my appearance is not necessarily one of me being like heavily overweight or heavily unhealthy or anything is because what I've learned to do in my life is like manage this tendency of mine. So I know that I can get kind of bingy with my eating, cram a lot of food in. And so I also know I have to like exert a bunch of control to manage that from time to time. And then I also have to make sure that I'm doing stuff to stay fit. So I like work out. When I'm coaching, I often go for long walks in nature because then it like moves my body. I can burn some calories that way, kind of free calorie burning. I make a point of going and playing sports that I like play a lot of pickleball. I'm sure you've heard that. And so like all of these things kind of burn some calories and they balance out that gluttony that I have, that gluttonous tendency. And so this is what most of us do. We have like a tendency that exists for us, and then we have like the set of patterns we've learned to create to manage them. But the trouble then for me is that I'm still like managing a part of myself. There's this like this dysfunction that exists in me that is out of harmony with who I want to be. Like who I would like to be in the world is a man who like eats when he's hungry and holds food as sacred, and a man who can enjoy a little bit of something really rich, as opposed to like, well, that first bit of cheese was good, but why? I mean, now we've got a bar of cheese left in the fridge and I'm just going to eat that anyhow. So I might as well eat it now, get the calories done with, you know, until I buy more cheese tomorrow. And so whilst I have like a degree of balance, there's like an internal war, so to speak, going on. And that isn't what I want. What I want is to be able to like enjoy the finer parts of life, but enjoy them as the finer parts of life, as opposed to them being like a hole I fall down and then I have to manage how I show up. To summarize all of that, what I notice is there's a lot of control I have to exert over myself. And that's not really how I'm at my highest self. I don't want to be living a life where I have to control a lot of who I am. I want to be able to be expressed and release the control, surrender to life as it shows up. So on the one hand, people might at this point argue like, well, you could just not do any control and like have your weight spiral out, or, you know, have whatever consequence that is. Maybe you die of a heart attack at a certain point, but you just surrender to that. That would be one option. But instead, what I wanted to do was bring this to the medicine and ask the medicine for some guidance. Like, hey, you know, I noticed there's this tendency that I have, and it's up right now. And I'd really love to like heal that part of me that feels the need to go for that. So, and I'll add one last thing before I go into like how that unfolded, which is some people will tell you like, oh, that's just the way you are. That's where we end most of our inquiry into ourselves. It's just the way I am. I'm just a dude that likes the finer things in life and likes to cram them all into my mouth or whatever other orifice there is as fast as possible, get it all in there, race to the bottom. But I would argue that that's not just the way I am. That's how I've learned to be. There's a reason that that is how I learned to show up, because to live harmoniously, which is our birthright, that wouldn't be the case. I would be better equipped to honor what I feel in my body. I would be better equipped to listen to the needs of my body, and to, when I'm full, not to eat more. So all of this is what I brought down. I'm giving you the here's why, and what I was working with. And so interestingly, a lot of the initial work with the medicine for me was kind of frustrating, because I would drink the medicine. Sorry, I should lay out how this works. When I'm working, I teach the classes during the day, and then in the evening I go and sit and drink the medicine. And I think this is really important, because then what I'm doing is I'm leading to an extent alongside people. I'm in the work. I'm engaged in my work as well as I'm leading with people. So I think that's really valuable, and allows me to kind of share the, like, as people are sharing their experience, I can also relate. I can share some of my experience a little bit, because they're the most important people. But I think there's value in that, as opposed to being kind of like, more historically like the priest who sort of like has the answers and has it all figured out and stands outside of the problems you find, and then like gives you guidance. That's not the game that we're playing in this work. The game we're playing in this work is the work never ends, and you're engaging in your work always. So initially quite frustrating. And what was frustrating for me was like, it was slow. The medicine was slow to come on. It felt very mild at times. And there was like this part of me that was like, come on, hit me in the head, like give it to me hard. And as I worked with that, what typically happens initially is people are like, oh, it's not working. Oh, I'm not getting what I'm supposed to get. But as you deepen in your work with this medicine, you start to realize I'm getting exactly what I need to get. I just don't like it. And it might be a little close. It's hard for me to see because it's right up against my face. And so I was sitting working with this, like, how is this making me feel? That's one of the questions we always ask. How does this thing, this experience I'm in right now, how's it making me feel? And I was feeling like restless and like trapped in like the boredom, and like, I'm going to miss out. I'm going to miss the mark. Nothing's happening. And so I could start to see, as I was working with this experience that the medicine was bringing me, this is the thing that I avoid. This experience of feeling trapped, of things not happening, of me missing the mark, of things taking too long, things going too slow, all of that is the reason that I hyperstimulate myself. I reach for something to like create interest, to create something. I'm consuming rather than just being with life as it's showing up in this moment. So this is why I used to smoke just so much pot, constantly would smoke pot. It's why I would drink, and then I would drink more. It wasn't because I was even like enjoying the taste of the alcohol anymore. We got diminishing returns. It was just because I was like, well, I don't want to just sit here in this moment of boredom. I want to elevate, always trying to climb out to the next level. And so what I got from my time working with this medicine was like, interestingly, a lesson. It's not the first time I've gotten this lesson, but it's a tough lesson for me to learn, which is realizing I've become who I learned to become was a man who is restless, a man who can't sit still, a man who's constantly looking for like the next thing to get beyond where we currently are, and has no capacity to surrender and sit right here in this moment, and to find the beauty available in this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. A man who's like allergic to boredom, and boredom isn't even a real thing. Boredom's just a story we attach to stillness, or to the moment we're currently finding ourselves in. There's no objective boredom in the universe. That's not a thing. It's like an experience we create for ourselves, a story about the experience we're in. And so I came home really, really realizing the work for me to do right now is to really create space, and then to allow myself to sit in that space. And that's a tough lesson. Like it's not the first time I've received that. And I can really see the value. And often when we get that message, when we get the same lesson we've already gotten, we're like, oh, I'm not doing any work, or oh, I thought I was past this, as though there's somewhere we should be. And by all means, I've done a lot of work in this particular area of my life. I've worked a lot with this, but it's a really tough lesson for me to learn. And so every time I go and work with my coach, every time I go to a transformational event, every time I go and work with the medicine, I learn it and I come back and I can practice a little bit more. So it's like maybe I came back and I practiced like 50%. And this time I come back and I'm practicing 70%. The next time, like 90%, then 95, then 98, till slowly over time, it becomes the way I live my life. And so the practice a lot right now for me is really noticing all of the ways I stimulate myself, noticing that desire in the moment to like reach for something. So I'll notice, I'll sit down to play a video game. Interesting, video games have lost a little of their appeal temporarily. They'll probably come back almost certainly. And then like the thing I would typically do is have a TV show running while I'm playing Street Fighter. So I've got like Curb Your Enthusiasm or whatever playing on my laptop there. And then I'm also playing video games. So there's a lot of stimulation coming in, right? And so I'm just like, I'm going to shut the TV off. I'm going to step back so there's a little more space in my life. I'm going for a drive. I've normally put a podcast on. I'm going to just turn that off and open the window and just allow a little bit more space. So that's the practice I'm in right now, is like allow a little more space. And it's funny to study myself as I do this and to witness like, oh, there's me fighting against this being a boring drive, or like, I'm stuck in traffic. Or even here's another example where I'm practicing. Our car has a radar cruise control. So you just set like, this is the top speed to go, and otherwise keep 2 car lengths between the car in front of me. Great, great, great innovation. Probably the best innovation I've seen in cars in years. And typically I get on the highway and I go about 10 above the speed limit, which is kind of, usually people go between 0 and 10 above the speed limit. And then some people go 30 under. That's fine. So typically I'm passing people, and what I'm practicing right now is just like sitting in the rightmost lane, the slow lane, as you call it, and then just letting myself be with that, allowing spaciousness in that moment. So it's not an easy lesson, it's not, that practice is challenging and it's demanding something of me. Oh, here's one more example. We went to the movie theater. We went to see Oppenheimer last night, which is a great movie. 3 hours long though. It was a long movie. And like part of the treat of going to the movie is that calories don't count, right? You go to the movie, you get a giant vat of popcorn with like a swimming pool worth of butter poured in, and you get like they call them sharing sizes, but really sharing size just means like all for Adam size. So I'd like just barrel through this family size thing of peanut M&Ms, which I love. And I'm not doing any of that. And I went for coffee the other day, and they had biscottis, and I was like, ooh, I could get a coffee and I could dip a biscotti. That'd be nice. That'd provide me a bit of food. I'm sort of engaging in this dialogue with myself where I'm like, well, but are you hungry? I'm like, well, no. And then, okay, well, is that what you want to do? Like, is that your practice right now? I'm like, well, no. And so I was just witnessing myself in a dialogue, waiting in line, kind of going back and forth. Well, I could get a lemon fog. I could get a coffee, because then there's less calories in the coffee, and then I could have the biscotti. And I'm like, oh my God, look at me bargaining. Till eventually I was just like, all right, let's get a coffee, and that's it. Just a decaf coffee. So I'm really in the practice of removing these things. And it's not the first time I'm in this practice, but it's the current time I'm in this practice. And that's what I'm working with. Seth, you write, I just started meditating and I've been feeling that exact same way. It's almost painful for me to sit there sometimes. Indeed. Yeah. One of the ways we kind of alleviate that for ourselves when we first started meditating, and there's nothing wrong with this, but as we do a guided meditation, because a guided meditation gives us something to listen to, right? It's like we're safe from the nothingness. Or we set a timer so that like, okay, I've got like I'll do this for this long. And these days I meditate every morning, and when I do so without there's no timer. There's maybe some music, maybe, often not, is a little bit better for me in terms of my practice. And just the way I hold it is I'm going to slow my body down. I'm going to breathe deeply, and I'm going to let that slow my mind down. If you slow your body, the mind will follow. And I do that until it feels like time to get up. And I bow 3 times and then I get up. It's challenging things. And Carol, bonjour, Carol. Carol says, silence can be scary, but is powerful. Indeed. And Lydia's just saying she relates to that inner dialogue. Well, good. Aho. So, so it's interesting, and I will admit to having some nervousness that I will slip back, and probably I will, and that's okay. You know, like the arc of our journey, our transformational journey, is that we remember something. You know, I remember, oh my God, I really benefit from spaciousness. That's when ideas come to me. That's when I start to notice where my inspiration is currently guiding me. And I'll be like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I'll start to get busy, and then I'll start to like maybe slip into like these old habits. And then one slip happens, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then it just starts to pile up. And then before I know it, I'm heading off to ceremony, feeling like bloated, physically, energetically, spiritually, just feeling bloated and not really plugged into spirit at all. And when that happens, it's a beautiful thing, because in order to remember, we have to forget. So we remember our path, and then we forget it, and then we remember. And one of the teachers I work with says that forgetting is so beautiful, because forgetting allows us to remember, and remembering is so, so beautiful. And so it's all beautiful, and it's all part of the path. Lydia, you say, I notice when I feel pulled to read a post and comment on some other time waster. I ask myself, is this really how I want to spend my time? I love it when I have the consciousness to ask that question. Often I'm like, I should really ask myself if I want to do this, but fuck it, I'm going to do it anyhow. But fuck it, I'm going to do it anyhow. Okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about Ruth, and then we'll bring her on. Let me have a sip of tea first. So Ruth, I don't know how Ruth and I connected. I'm going to ask her that. That'll be her job. But Ruth joined us in the Forge, and one of the things that I so admired about her was her belief that she wasn't necessarily doing the work that hard, or like isn't really showing up, simultaneously coupled with just how much she committed, how much she commits into this transformational work, just the incredible courage that she has. And so Ruth was with us for our 2 years ago. She stuck around and joined for membership on the leadership team this year. And then she's taking a break, but she's so committed to continuing this path. She's like, but I want to put my deposit down for the following year. So she's coming back to join our senior leadership team, not this year, but the following year. So that's pretty cool. That's our first registration for 2024. So we'll talk about all of this. We're going to talk about why transformation is not just free, all of that. Ruth, why don't you put your camera on, put on your mic, get your damn self on this damn live. Hello.
Hello.
I liked how you were looking off to the side and then kind of peeked over. That was a nice touch.
It wasn't intentional, and I don't know what I was looking at.
It's like they in news broadcasting, you're always meant to like look up from your papers when the camera comes onto you. Yeah, like if will this work? Yeah, and then we turn my camera on, and then hi, it's me, Adam. It's very effective.
Busy reading the news before
That's
I
right.
come on.
Yeah. Or like, I don't have any appropriate jokes I can make right now, so I'm just not going to say anything else. My mind just filled with a bunch of stupid, dumb jokes. Well, hello.
Hi.
Hello. So let's start. How did we meet? Like, how did you and I first come into contact with one another?
Okay, so I had a coach a few years ago, and he actually sent me one of your videos once, and I can't remember what it was about. And then at some point after we'd finished working together, he said, I was thinking of you. I did this Adam's Creating Clients course last year. I thought you'd find it useful. So I looked into that, joined your Creating Clients course. And then, of course, you're talking about the Forge. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll give that a go.
Aha. Wow, that's so cool. So you first found your way, we first connected through the Creating Clients course.
Yeah.
Boy, we've been through so much that it's like, I completely, you've just been so, so a part of this work that we do that like, I had completely forgotten about that. That's awesome. Cool. So what actually led you, Creating Clients course was sort of I'm trying to remember, I think 10-week course, fairly
Yeah,
high
yeah.
touch, some group calls, but not a lot, and not a lot of coaching in it. So what had you go from there into choosing into the Forge?
I think you're sort of talking about transformation. I knew that I still had some, will always have
Ah,
some, yeah. Um, I think ways of being that I knew were holding me back.
uh-huh.
And it's, yeah, so it was like, okay, that sounds good. I get my coaching developed, which was a big thing for me, because I wasn't confident in my coaching. Even though I'd done a qualification, got distinction, I still
Uh-huh.
wasn't like confident in it. Um, so that was great, but then also sort of the transformation in the way of being as well, which
Uh-huh.
appealed to me. Yeah.
And what are some of those ways of being that you were kind of present to in that moment? Like,
Um,
oh, I could shift this, or
yeah, I think connection with people. I've been through not a rough relationship, but I think a relationship that um had sort of closed me down a bit, and
uh-huh.
I was struggling to open back up after that relationship. So I thought, okay, a little bit of um support in the Forge may help with that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And were you like for me, when I first came into this work, most people would have been like, wow, that guy's pretty shut down, pretty closed down. But if you'd said that to me, I would have been like, no, I'm like very open, and like I connect with people. Like I couldn't see it. Like, to what extent could you see it, and to
I
what extent could
I
you
I
not?
could see that I was having um not problems, but I found it more difficult to connect with people.
Uh-huh.
That I didn't feel that I could somehow fully be myself or be comfortable
Yeah.
connecting. And even though I was trying, it was sort of like I felt really sort of stilted and just sort of not myself, and full of lots of worries about how people might perceive me and that sort of thing, which obviously makes connection really difficult.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what was, obviously you chose the path of transformation, but like what were you doing? What let me find the right way to ask this. Like, what was manifesting given what you've just shared? Do you want me to give an example, or do you know what I mean?
Give me an example.
So for me, I was becoming, in the early days, like pre any of this kind of work, I was becoming more and more frustrated with people for their stupidity. And I was becoming more and more right about like my perspective of the world. And so there's like a disconnection with the world, all that stuff. And then how that was manifesting was like I was feeling frustrated and irritated. And then I was also isolating myself more, like finding I was
Yeah.
becoming more and more comfortable doing stuff by myself, but at the same time feeling a little like, man, I wish I got invited to that party or whatever. So like any of that stuff you can
Yeah,
distinguish.
definitely the isolating, but wishing that I'd been invited to the party. But for
Uh-huh.
me, I'm more likely to direct stuff inwards rather than outwards.
Yep.
So I believe that everybody else has got everything sorted and they're all fine, and I'm struggling to connect because it's all to do with me, and I'm the problem.
Aha. Uh-huh. Got it. So was there like self-loathing going on, or was it that strong at this point?
Yeah, I wouldn't say self-loathing, but a sort of a belief around being defective, I think.
Aha.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that one well. Got it. Okay, so like a little bit of belief, like there's maybe something wrong with me, or like
Yeah,
why
yeah.
can't I kind of make this happen? And at the same time, maybe I don't know if you're
And
like,
getting really frustrated about it as well. Yeah.
right, I don't even fucking want to make this. Fuck these people. That's more
Yeah.
my stuff, less
Yeah.
yours.
And every
Right.
so often going, oh, screw all this. I don't know why I'm doing it.
Aha,
Which you've
aha.
heard, I'm sure.
Well, both
Yeah,
from you
yeah.
at times, but also from me. Plenty of
Yeah.
like often, yeah. Okay, so this is all going, and then what is happening? Like, are you seeing any parallels at this point in terms of like how your coaching is going, or is it manifesting in your coaching? Like, what's the impact there?
I think with the coaching, it's more sort of self-doubt afterwards, like, and then it's sort of like feeling like I have to do something more than just ask people questions sort of thing. And yeah,
Uh-huh.
obviously there's a format to it. Yeah, I think it's more sort of holding back in coaching and sort of not letting my curiosity flow.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Got it. It's a little bit stilted, kind of a bit
Yeah.
rigid, maybe.
Yeah, but then some of it, I'm like, I don't know how much of that is. I mean, like, that's sort of how I came across in the Forge. But outside the Forge and coaching, I don't know how much of that was my perception of myself afterwards, or actually was that how I was being.
Right. Okay, got it. So are you aware of this stuff as you choose in? Like, are you like, all right, I want to kind of work on this sort of stuff, or like, what's the, the catalyst for you coming
Sometimes
in?
the connection, I knew I wanted to work on that, but then
Yeah.
sometimes the transformation is just what is sort of coming up at the time. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and I was going to say in the first year, I know you asked us at the beginning, what do you want transformed? And I can't remember what I said in the first year, but this year I can, and I really did choose into that. But as it was happening, some of the choices I made weren't conscious, but I
Uh-huh.
sort of just followed or it just came out, and that was the path.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like what I would call our survival mechanism, the part of ourselves that, well, we talk about this, we teach this, like the part of ourselves that's not really it's not congruous, it's not congruent with who we are. It's the way we've learned
Yeah,
to show up in
yeah,
the world because it's safer. Sometimes can get us, that can be the thing that brings us to the path, the tool, the opportunity that like allows us to free ourselves of our survival mechanism.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. I went into the accomplishment coaching, the coach training that changed my life, uh, thinking like I just need the technique. I'm just missing a bit of technique, and if I have the technique, then I'll be all sorted. And it was like, oh, that what a gift that it brought me there, and that's not at all what was missing, not
Yeah,
even
yeah.
remotely.
And I think, yeah, I can equate with some of that as coming into the Forge thinking, yeah, I need connection and I need my coaching skills to be better. So I need to know
Uh-huh.
how to connect. I did know though the connection wasn't learning skills to connect, because you can read a
Uh-huh.
book and do that. It was like,
Yes.
what am I holding on to or believing that is getting in the way of
Uh-huh.
connection? And I couldn't see what it was.
Right. And so how did that unfold? How did that unfold for you once you kind of like started up with us? Like you've got this year of development training, whatever, in the Forge, and
Mhm.
I'm guessing some expectations about how it's going to go. So how do things go from there for you, in terms of your experience, whatever?
I sort of think by the end of the first year, I'd sort of lost sight of the connection thing. I don't know whether that's because I was connecting more naturally, but I think what the first year gave me more was reconnecting with my assertiveness, because like I say, I was so closed down, so scared
Uh-huh.
of people, which obviously comes out with makes connection difficult.
Yes.
Um, and that was sort of, I think, the big breakthrough for the first year.
What do you do? So when I'm scared of people, there's like a couple tendencies I have. One will be that I'll just avoid them altogether. So I'll like become very introverted. And then the other one that I'll do is like kind of try to be charming. I'll try to make them like me. I'll try to be really charming and enjoyable and funny. And all of it is like kind of layered on a bit thick. What do you do when you're kind of scared of people?
So more sort of introverted. So
Uh-huh.
I will go quiet, or
Yeah.
take a back seat in things and step aside. Um,
Bite
or
down on your own opinions, kind of bite your tongue a bit.
um, sometimes, and sometimes just not allow myself to form opinions, because it's
Ah,
like,
I see. It's like
yeah,
even one
yeah. So
step before that.
don't even get there.
Uh-huh.
Um, And then the other thing I do is sort of sometimes I'll force myself to connect, and then it will come across as a little bit robotic.
Uh-huh. Got
Yeah,
it.
and like you say, and maybe similar to you, I'll try and make a quip, but for me, it'll come across like I'm sharp or having a go at somebody. Whereas actually,
Right.
I'm sort of thinking, I think I'm being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I look back, so much of my wit when I was younger, like when I was in the throes of this, was very like, it was at other people's expense. So
Mm.
like the way I would try to connect with people or like to make someone like me would be like, I would make fun of that person over there, like on stage or walking by or whatever. And, sometimes people will laugh along, but it always creates this energy, which is like, geez, if he's, well, it's not a good energy, like he's
It's
tearing
not,
down
and
that
people just think,
person.
well, if you're doing that about them, you're going to do it about me.
When is
Yeah,
it my turn? That's
yeah.
right. Yeah. Uh-huh. Got it. Okay. And so, are there any like highlights or lowlights? I'd love to hear lowlights too of that first year, stuff that you remember or that you found challenging, or instances where you're just like, whoa, I didn't realize this was here.
Yeah. I really found that I found gaining feedback quite challenging. I
Uh-huh.
found being on video and knowing that my coaching could be reviewed. I
Uh-huh.
found that really challenging, and that would make me very nervous. I
Like just
remember,
the act of recording, not even having it
yeah,
reviewed,
just
but just the
the
act of recording,
knowing that it
knowing.
may
Uh-huh.
be reviewed. So of course that's like goes all the way through the year with
Yes.
me.
Yeah.
And that's something I probably was only getting a little bit more comfortable with by
Yeah.
the end of the second year. Um, I remember the first year, I remember the retreat. The retreat is awesome, and I remember really enjoying the retreat, but also I do remember the survival mechanism work. Um, and I think, and particularly because the first year, my survival mechanism, it's hard to say with hindsight how aware I was of it. I
Right.
don't think I was that aware. I sort of knew I could be that sometimes, but actually having that come up when I'm scared or nervous or something, I don't think I'd equated it as, that actually that's there. It's always been there. I thought it was
Yes.
just something that occasionally happened.
Yeah. I've been working on a distinction around this. We'll share it for everyone listening and watching, which is that we know the playfully, we'll call it the shitty stuff we do. Like we know we do it sometimes. And that's we know that like you can rely on what I'm saying, everyone, because whenever we get that 360 review from work, we're like, oh yeah, I know I do that stuff. There's sort of like a safety in knowing it. It's like the punch we see coming. We're like, oh yeah, I know I can be bossy sometimes, or I know I can blah blah blah. But knowing at that level is sort of like abstract. It's like, yeah, I know I can do that certain points, certain times, and the places we can see it are the times when we feel really justified in it. And then it's not
Yeah,
such a big deal. We're like, well, yeah, I'm doing this now, but it's because that person's a dickwad, or that person cut me off in traffic, or that person's getting a taste of their own medicine or whatever. And what I've come to conclude is that that kind of knowing is completely distinct from the experience in the moment of having this stuff reflected, like being caught almost red-handed. We're like,
yeah, and
go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say, and the actually receiving the impact that it has on other people, because although you
Yeah.
sort of think, well, yeah, okay, it's probably not nice for other people, actually having people tell you their experience as well, it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
and that helps you become more aware of it. I think it's like knowing how it impacts others.
Uh-huh. One of my teachers recently was sharing how people will get coached for years. They'll drink ayahuasca for years. They'll go to a Tony Robbins event for years, and they see how they're being, and it never changes. And the reason is because they are seeing how they're being, but they're not coming to acceptance of it. And we kind of need
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that piece you're describing where someone's like sharing like this is how it's landing on me, is the point where we kind of start to move from seeing it, knowing we do it, to like a full acceptance of like its impact in the world, and like, wow, that's how I'm landing on people. And until we get that feedback in that way, we can't really accept it. All we can accept is like, yeah, I do that sometimes. We can only kind of come to peace with it to the extent we're able to feel it. And this exercise that we're talking about is designed to really like bring us into a full-fledged like experience of this, because only then can we really heal it.
Yeah. And it's sort of and allowing yourself, because you're in a supportive environment as well. Whereas
Yes.
you try to do it out on the street, it probably wouldn't be the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I cut you off in traffic and I just wanted to come over here and ask you, how did that leave you feeling?
Yeah.
Wait, what are you doing? Why are you putting a knife in my tires? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So what was your process like upon, so you get this kind of feedback, you know, you and now you're in a bit of the healing process, so to speak. What, how was that experience for you? Like how did that go on the heels of that?
Yeah. So obviously it had an impact in the retreat itself. And then you're sort of taking it with you. And it's a strange feeling. You just sort of feel out of sorts
Yes.
and trying to sort of absorb it. This is the first year.
Uh-huh. Yes.
um yeah, and then sort of after a while it just it sort of integrates,
Yeah.
yeah. Um and you settle down, but then you notice more when you're doing it in the moment and go, oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
okay, that's that thing I do. And
Yes.
yeah, and then choose not to. And actually my survival mechanism, I would say, from my first year, I'm seeing it show up less,
Uh-huh.
but it's still there. Yeah, I still
Of
do it.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We never throw this stuff out completely because it's how we learn to get here as a child. I find this is the point usually. Well, first of all, this is the thing we construct our lives to avoid having to be with. We build an entire life avoiding people that show up a particular way, avoiding circumstances where we show up a particular way because we hate this part of ourselves. And so we don't want to, we can't be with it. We can't we can't have grace for ourselves there. So we build our lives to avoid it. And then we come on a retreat like this and we're like putting it in people's face
Mm,
because we can't avoid it. That's the hard truth, is that there's no escaping ourselves. And the more we try to shove something below the surface, the more it comes out sideways in sneaky ways that we can't see. So we put this in front of people's faces, and often the experience I find I have and see is like people feeling, like you said, really uncomfortable, and often like there's something wrong. And the flavor of
yeah,
something
yeah.
wrong. You want to say anything on that?
No,
Okay.
no, I
Okay,
was
cool.
just
I'll
agreeing. Yeah.
finish and you might have more. But like there's certain flavors of it being wrong. Like when something wrong is like, I suck. Fuck. I do that. I leave that impact on people. I'm wrong. This is terrible that I feel this way. I'm just a garbage human being, which is like hard to in the moment see that that's part of our healing process. Because what we're doing
Yeah,
is we're coming
yeah.
to a surrender of like some stuff that this is the reason we've kept it from ourselves, because we have absolutely no love or grace for ourselves when we show up that way. So that's the first flavor of wrong. The second flavor of wrong is like, you're wrong. You guys are wrong for doing this exercise. This shouldn't be happening. You're leaving me feeling bad. This is, and then there's like all manner of like descriptions of wrong. This is, you're triggering people's trauma. You're, you should set this up a different way. You should give us more warning. You know, here are all the things you should do so that this experience
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
currently in is not the experience I'm currently in, right? So basically it's wrong that I'm here. You should fix it. I shouldn't have this, you know, something along those lines.
It's interesting because the second year as well, and I can remember having those thoughts on the retreat because I had a really
Yes.
big like reaction to the sort of naming of my survival mechanism.
Aha.
Um, but I had also offered it up. So it
Yeah,
was a
you
bit
fool.
like, yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, you know, sometimes it wasn't a conscious thing, but that was what came out of me when we were talking about it, and
Yes.
it was a thing that needed to come up, and I needed
Yes.
to do healing around it.
And this is why I think this is one of the reasons transformation is so elusive. And we actually hide the ball of healing from ourselves. So I'm going to explain that, which is we're like, I don't want to feel that way, and further, I shouldn't. And if you make me feel that way or anything, it's wrong. And so then we go about constructing an entire life and circumstance and people around, everything, our whole life is constructed so that I never have to feel that way. And what it means is that what there is to be healed can never come to the surface. And
Yeah.
because it can never
Yeah.
come to the surface, it can never really be healed. It just forever stays underneath, like a pearl growing in an oyster. You know, it's got the grit in the oyster and it builds the pearl around it. And we end up with this big tumor, basically, we're stuck with. And it doesn't work. And so here we are, like crazy people, you know, bringing this up to the forefront. Of course, we do a bunch of work to set it up. We do a bunch of work to get permission from people, and we do a bunch of work on the tail end to make sure people are held throughout the process. But what we can't do is eliminate people's reaction to their own
Yeah.
healing process.
Yeah. And well,
So
it's
yeah,
interesting because that second year, my survival mechanism was something I'm very aware of because it's played out in my life. But what I was
yes,
doing was hiding it from other people,
aha,
along with because it's had an impact on my life, along with the sort of the emotional impact that it had on me as well.
yes,
And it all came up. Yeah.
yeah. So we're going to come to the second year in a bit because I really want to, you know, that's
Yeah.
been a real powerful experience for you. You've led the way in a lot of regards. But before we go there, so how did on the heels of that first retreat and the rest of, like, how did that go from there? How did the second half of the Forge go for you, and what was it like? And
So I'm struggling to remember because this year has had such an impact.
aha,
But you know, what I do remember is right at the end of the Forge, I can remember that I was more expressed,
aha,
definitely than I was at the beginning. And I went for a job, which was a huge step up in leadership for me. So like my courage had come about, and I got support in the Forge for going for that. So yeah, it had a huge impact on my life. I got the job.
aha.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And any impact on your coaching practice in that first year?
Yeah, well, definitely, definitely more connection with people. So more clients as well.
Nice, cool. It's okay, by the way. I just want to make sure you know it's okay if you're like, nope, nothing. That's
Yeah,
totally
no,
fine too.
it had the
Yeah.
first year. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Okay, well then, so let's go to the second year, and I'm going to set this up by talking about sort of like the context for that first year of what we call leadership, which is in the first year of the Forge, people are basically really learning just to kind of see through this lens that we're training. You know, we're helping people see what I would call like an extra dimension. So initially we see like a flat painting, and then in the second year, you're learning to, you could say, like, distinguish the brush strokes in the painting rather than just the
Yeah.
image that's there, or see like more below the surface. And so first year people, their job is to just show up however they show up and do their best to learn the material, and that's fine, that's all good. The second year, people are leading, they're learning to lead based on how they're being. And so what that means is part of your job as a second year leader or second year participant, whatever we want to call it, is to show up and get the most value out of the Forge. And if you're feeling really frustrated or struggling, to like get supported rather than just barf that all over the space. Not that you can't have your feelings, but we start to train the ability to recognize, oh, I'm having an experience, I'm having a set of feelings, and there's going to be an impact if I just vomit at that everywhere. How else can I allow myself to have this, but be a little more responsible for the impact, starting to become more powerful in terms of how you show up, the impact you have, all of that sort of stuff. And the other thing I'll share to set this up is that we lean into you a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're standing a little more powerfully. We're reflecting with a little more, still plenty of love, but we're also bringing a lot more rigor, kind of letting people get away with less might be one way to put it. So before we go to the retreat, how you know, I've kind of set up this prefacing. How did you experience this second year?
Definitely more rigor, if I think early on in the second year, and sort of getting reflected how you're showing up and the impacts that is having through your leadership and on your leadership. And yeah, and it can be a bit uncomfortable,
Yes.
but you're sort of held with love through that. And yeah, and the holding with love sort of makes it easier.
Yeah.
to hold, but that rigor is amazing, because that does have such an impact. It's had
Mm,
such an impact on my leadership, how I show up for myself, how I show up for other people. Don't get me wrong, I'm still late occasionally, or or don't hit a deadline that I've
right.
committed to. But I'm much better at clearing things up afterwards,
Uh-huh.
and perhaps not doing it in the first place. So the rigor is sort of really useful, and shows you sort of the areas that you have to work on.
Aha. I've got an example I'll share, but is there any example you can think of where you're like, where you got some of that rigor, where you had an experience of like showing up a particular way and like, oof, okay, there it is.
Yeah. So early on, I had sort of taken on too much in my life and doing other things, and with my business, doing a job, doing home repair work as well. And I'd committed to doing the Essence conversations, and I hadn't done them before the deadline. And I'm going,
So
yeah,
just
but
so
I've
everyone
got
knows,
so
this is
much
an
on.
exercise that we give to
Yeah.
everyone that you committed to doing. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. And then sort of, and then having it sort of held up to me, what's going on, Ruth? How come you haven't done it? You've committed to it. Um, and through the sort of leadership tier above me as well. And I think that was just, yeah, okay, that is how I'm showing up. Some of me at that time was, well, this is how it is. I don't care, sort of thing, but I did care. Yeah.
Yes.
And just having that sort of, actually, do you care? Why are you here? What have you committed to sort of in the long term, in the forge?
Yes.
um yeah.
That's such a great example. I'm going to break some of that out and interrupt me at any point if you want to add something in.
Okay.
So Ruth's talking about an exercise she's already done once, right? That's part of this because this is her second year through. And so we ask everyone to commit to doing this thing that they're going to do complete by a certain point, so that then we can work with it. And we noticed Ruth had just nothing, no comment, no mention, just wasn't there. And so on the one hand, it's like, what's the big deal? She's already done it. She already knows. She's busy, as we all are. So why bother? So that's typically how we kind of relate to the stuff we're taking on in our lives. And then second, for us, it's also like, what's the big deal? Like, why do we even have to have a conversation about this? Doesn't really matter. Let's step over it. That's typically how we approach our own leadership, like leading others, because we're like, ugh, I don't want to be that annoying nag. I don't want to blah, blah, blah. But if Ruth, who is now a member of our leadership team, is saying, I'm going to do something, and then is just ignoring it and not doing it, that's going to have an impact in the space. That's what we call your clearing as a leader. So now the people who are in our first year of this program are seeing Ruth, who's a leader, kind of saying she's going to do something and not doing it. And so they're going to get this idea like, oh, I guess that's how we be. I guess if you say you're
Yeah.
going to do something and you're busy, no big deal, just ignore it and we'll all step over it. And collectively, we'll all be fine and good. And so our job in developing Ruth's leadership is not to like force her to do anything, but to bring this in front of her so that she has to look at it. So she has to confront like, oh, there's an impact I'm having. And to have her remind herself, why are you here? Why do you want to develop your leadership? Can you see that this would have an impact in your leadership? Can you see other places in your life where this might be having the same impact? Anything you'd like to add to any of that, Ruth?
I think it's just interesting, as I can remember sort of it being highlighted as well, is sort of, I'm like, oh, I've got an evening free to relax. And of course, that's the evening where it's all being held up in front of me. And
Right.
it's like, well, okay. If I had made my commitment, or I had broached it, or had a discussion about it and come to another agreement, I would have had that night off. Does
Uh-huh.
that make sense? And it's just like, I have
Yes.
created this. Yeah.
Right. So you could have had a night off, because if you had
Yeah.
done this already, then it would have been nice and sweet. But because right. And it'd be
Either done
easy.
it or shown up in leadership and sort of said, this is what's going on for me.
That's right.
Can I have an extension? You know, and maybe speaking to the other people in the forge, sort of saying this isn't the way I want it to go, or
Yes. Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people could hear this and think like, oh, got it. The way you're trained leadership is people are just have to do everything they say they'll do.
No,
But that's not it either. We just, if we make a promise, a commitment, a declaration, we want to make sure we let people know when we're not going to honor that, so that they can adjust accordingly. And so we're standing for that more so than any particular thing that Ruth has to do or doesn't do or anything along those lines. Ruth could have even come to us and said, hey, I'd really love to enroll you guys in us and me not doing this. I've already taken this on. We'd probably come back and push back on her, but that was available. That could have been part of the conversation. So that's a great example. And I want to offer one more, and then we're going to start to go into the second year of the retreat for you. One more example is we had someone on our leadership team who would show up late to the calls, and not a lot late, usually like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes sometimes, or would just flat out forget we have a call. They'd make another appointment. And so when this happens, there's a few things that happen. The first is we tend to get annoyed with people, especially when they've made a commitment. So like over here, those of us that have shown up on time are like, fuck you. We're all here. Why aren't you? We're here on time. Why aren't you? And so when we're developing someone's leadership, the first thing we have to do is be responsible for our own being, our own energy. Because if we try to support someone from fuck you, stupid, they're going to feel that. And many of us have had this experience where like our boss is sort of like developing us, but really it feels like they're hammering us in the forehead. It's not pleasant. It's hard for us to receive. It feels condescending. We're left feeling stupid, and we can't expand into that. So we got to do our own work first. And we have to realize this is this person's journey. Their process requires this, as opposed to it being wrong how they're showing up. You should just always be on time. Well, but then how are they ever going to learn if this is the thing in their way? They have to show up late in order to start to learn this. So that's our work. And then the rigor that Ruth has been mentioning on our side is to not step over it, because it'd be so easy. And we wouldn't have to have a third conversation. You know what I'm talking about, Ruth, right? We're going to have this conversation again. Fuck. Okay, we're going to have the conversation again. All of us collectively want to just step over it because that's easier. But instead, what will develop this person's leadership is us bringing the conversation again, and possibly even saying like, hey, we'd like to have you present to the impact when you do this. Ruth, can you share how you are left feeling? I'm kind of frustrated. I'm kind of annoyed. I feel like, why am I showing up? Why am I pulling all the weight? And that's how this person gets to then start to take this on in their lives, because they're finally coming into a presence, like being aware of the impact, and then they can finally start to take it on. The last thing I want to say here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Ruth, is like, this is why transformation is really hard. And it's way easier not to. It's so much easier to just let this stuff slide. And that's why people talk a lot about transformation, but what they're actually doing is letting shit slide because it's easier. Anything you want to add to that?
Just that you see that a lot in workplaces, and
Yes.
the sort of the level of leadership development or management training within workplaces do not address all this stuff. They don't address how people are showing up.
Yeah. Or you get it like 6 months later. You be more punctual. Oh, great, no problem. Yeah, I know I can be late. And then of course we're not present to any impact, all of that stuff. So first half of the Forge, how's it going for you prior to the retreat? Going good, going medium, going mediocre?
Sort of mediocre. Like I say, I'd taken a lot on and I was exhausted. So I was showing up to the Forge with that one of my survival mechanisms, coming up and just like, oh, I'm exhausted. So that I was sort of finding it difficult even sort of before the retreat. And again, thinking, why have I done this? Why have I taken all this on? Lots of sort of resistance to just sort of going with it. But also enjoying it as well. Yeah.
Cool. Got it. So it's hard. at this point, challenging, kind of grindy is what I'm hearing. Like, oh, okay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna show up
but
and
I
make
don't
myself
think
do
it
it.
was just the forge. It was just sort of everything in my life at that moment, doing lots of, spending all my weekend carrying bricks around and stuff. So I was physically exhausted. I was in a
Why
new
are you carrying
job,
books
so
around?
like mentally, I'm doing doing a renovation on my bathroom at that
Oh,
point.
cool.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And
Okay.
taking the opportunity to, but like I had support from my brother to do it. And although it might not have been the best weekend for me, it's like, okay, do this. I've just started a new job. I'd started the forge, but it's like, okay, this is when you're available. This is when we're doing it. Yeah.
And is this the point where I'm starting to trigger you because I sound or occur a little bit like someone in your life who kind of knows it all?
You've always triggered me.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. I just got
Perfect.
the courage to tell you at the retreat. And
Amazing.
that that was, I knew that actually, okay, if you remind me of my dad, um not all of my dad,
Of course. Yeah.
but I knew there was healing through that path.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like, this scares me, run towards it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So for everyone, like Ruth shared with me at one point, I'm a little triggered by you at times because you can kind of have all the answers or be a little bit of a know-it-all. One sec, someone is texting me and I need to respond to this. Great, done. And so there's like two parts to that. The first part is for me to be responsible on my side and to really take a look and see, like, because part of my essence is brilliance, but when I get scared, I can be condescending, I can be arrogant, I can talk way too much. There's just all of these parts that happen when I'm scared. So I have to be responsible for that part. Sometimes I do get scared, and sometimes I do, like, I am a know-it-all. That is there sometimes. So I have to take ownership for that. I have to recognize that truth. And then the second part of it is that there's a portion for Ruth where she's projecting onto me or just
Yeah.
receiving or has a particular listening for me. Until I've taken responsibility from my side of that, there's no space for Ruth to take a look on her side, because she's doing this courageous thing, bringing this thing to me to express it and to share it. And what typically happens, I don't know if you've ever done this anywhere else, Ruth, but typically what we get back is like, I see this a lot in coaching and leadership training. We get back like, well, how is that your projection? So there's no
Yeah.
looking. Yeah, go ahead, Ruth.
I was going to say, and it was really surprising for me, sort of when I raised it, I didn't know how you were going to react. And part of me was like, oh, okay. I just sort of found that really amazing, that like, you're okay. Yeah, there's some of this for me to own. And I really
Yes.
wasn't expecting that at all.
Yeah. And that's what lets us like relax, because then it's not like, oh fuck, I'm crazy, or okay, got it, I've got to do all the work over here and there's nothing for me to look at on that side, there's nothing for you to look at. We're left feeling very alone in those moments, and
And
like,
and
yeah,
interesting that actually with that trigger, that actually would have just cemented it even more, wouldn't that? If you
totally,
think
yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, let me put it back over there with you, I've got the answer for
Yeah.
this too. This is what
Yeah.
we often get from leaders that tell us they're very open. Yeah, you can come and tell me anything, but then of course you can tell them anything, but they don't actually let it in. It bounces off of them and lands back on your forehead and you're like, I got hit. And so this is a really great moment, you practicing courage, me getting some feedback, an opportunity to take a look on my side to see where that's still there. And the truth is, it's always going to be present for me, because I'm always going to get scared if I keep
Yeah.
stepping up
Yeah.
my game. Hey, Maria. And so great. Okay, so we have that moment. We're working through the forge, and then we go off to the retreat. And of course, this time there's actually two retreats for you. The first part is 3 days just for the leadership team, where we're doing some work there. And that was we did a lot of movement, like a lot of lifting in that
Yeah.
first retreat.
Yeah. And well, it was, so I came because I'd enjoyed the first retreat in the first
Yeah.
year. So I was quite excited to come, but
Yeah.
I sort of knew it it was already a hard year for me, but it was also like, okay, I've got 2 weeks somewhere completely different, but
Yeah.
still sort of doing my work, but still a bit of nerves because it's like, okay, it's the second year. There's part of this that I don't know how it's going to go. But I came to that with courage, and that's when I told you, actually, you trigger me sometimes because
Yes.
yeah, you remind me of my dad. And actually the sort of heavy lifting we did as the leadership team together, that it was really powerful, but it was sort of different. That really was sort of around leadership, I think, rather than our own transformation work. And then it's all transformation work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the transformation work happens with the participants in the second part of the retreat as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. This distraction is showing up again. 1 second. There we go. Okay. I told someone, no, we're actually scheduled for this time. And I realized, oh no, that was my mistake. I scheduled it wrong.
Right.
Eat crow. Yes. So yeah, part of what we're doing that first retreat is we're clearing the space. We're clearing our own leadership, developing the team so that then we can be the clearing for the rest of the Forge to show up into for that second retreat. So
which is, yeah, I remember now, because it's like, okay, what are you holding? And you were there like, what are you holding on us? What are you holding on the Forge? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. What's the resentment? What's, anything like that, which is super human to have. It'd be weird if we didn't develop some stuff, especially as we're doing this kind of work that can be really confronting. When we get confronted, we create stories, blah, blah, blah. So then we do that work. Everyone else joins us. We've got 5 days together. And then what do you want to share about your experience of that second, the full-fledged retreat?
I think that I had a big reaction to the sharing of my survival mechanism, or the naming of another survival mechanism I use. And like I say, I knew that one had some quite, I was going to say sad impacts, but yeah, it must have been sad because that's a lot of what came out with it.
Yeah. Would you be willing to share the name?
Yeah.
You don't have to. You don't have to if it feels too close.
Well, I might as well, because I'm starting to post about it, but I haven't posted.
Beautiful.
It's just the name of it. So it is. I've forgotten it now. It will come to me. I've got half of it. I can't remember what the other half is. It's something doormat, and it's the doormat part which was the most sort of triggering. Yeah.
Right. Was it devastated doormat?
It was devastated doormat. Yeah. And I was devastated. Yeah.
Yes. To hear that.
Literally to hear that. Yes. Yeah. And it's
so
like yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
The doormat bit wasn't surprising. Like I say, I've had some challenging relationships with people because of that. Yeah. Or some toxic relationships, and that's because of that survival mechanism. It means it will attract certain types of, it'll attract more exploitative people.
Yes.
So, and what came up as well. I mean, the whole retreat, we've done quite a bit with Carrie doing her sort of embodiment work. We've done a lot of sort of loosening and stuff. And it's just like there was a whole sort of torrent of emotion underneath it. Yeah.
Yes.
That was ready to come out. And yeah, and persisted. And I went through phases. Okay, I accept. Then this shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't be going on for so long. So I'd start resisting it.
Yeah. So the for everyone listening, the name, the devastated doormat, what we're doing is we're giving a name to a way of being that Ruth, me, any of us have learned to like kind of fall into when we're in certain types of confrontation. Because Now, people would be like, well, what's the point of that? What's the benefit of being a doormat? Can you share, Ruth, or if you're able in this moment, like what is one of the benefits of falling into doormat state?
Yeah, that people don't get angry with you. And if you've got people
Uh-huh.
that get very, very angry, it's a really safe way to be. It's
Aha.
that you appease people.
Aha.
You
Totally.
give them what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. Probably can be liked down that path too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, she's so agreeable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these names we create with the intention of like giving it helps us see something a little bit. We can claim it a little bit more. We become closer to it when we name it. The way our fear works is that we keep it at bay and then we can't see it. It's sort of like the monster under the bed. You don't look under the bed and the fear stays there. If you turn your flashlight on and look under the bed, you discover there's no fear. You confront the fear, so to speak, and then you have power over it. So we're coming up with these names, but that can be really edgy because we don't want to look at the fear because we don't want it to be true about ourselves. And it sounds like
Yeah.
in this moment you were having an experience of like
Well,
being able to see.
and
Go
well,
ahead.
for me as well, it's like, well, I know I've been like that. I've been trying to not be like that.
Yes.
And now you're putting it in front of me, I'm still like that sort of thing.
Yes.
And that was hard to take, because for me before, my survival mechanism was something I needed to mend or fix.
Yes. Like get rid.
Yeah.
I've looked at
Yeah.
it.
So
Now it's gone
now get rid
forever.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is like, I love that you said that because this is so much a part of our transformational journey is at first we don't even want to consider that we have any kind of survival mode. There's no part, we're mostly good for the most part. And then we have to like face, okay, I've got this part that I don't like. And then the next phase is that we try to excise it. We try to remove it surgically. So how can I heal it so that that never ever shows up and blah, blah, blah. And, um, and then from there, eventually, well, I want to say one more part about that. What that is, like that part where we want to heal it or remove it or get rid of it, is ultimately hating it. That's what we're doing. I hate this part of
Yeah.
myself and it
Yeah.
should never
Yeah.
be there. And you can't hate yourself to love. It doesn't work. I've tried. I have data. We the third phase is we come to an acceptance, a loving acceptance of this part of ourselves. Not like, oh yeah, I'm arrogant and I know it all and that's just who I am and fuck you if you don't like it. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a different version of hating it. It's more we come to accept and love like, oh, when I get scared, one of the things I've learned to do is become very arrogant because that leads to safety. That lets me move you down the rung and then I get to reestablish my dominance, whatever. And so it sounds like you were moving from that second stage to that third stage a little bit. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that. So it's sort of like, that I was there with it being something that I hated.
Aha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then having the thing I hate about myself out in the open.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Super challenging. This is the, not only are we naming it, but we're also like having people present to the impact of it. So this is hard work. We're looking at the very thing we've built an entire lifetime around not looking at, making sure it never comes to the surface, and we're bringing it to the surface. And so this is the height of where people feel like I'm wrong, they're wrong, this is wrong, shouldn't do this work, blah, 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 blah. So what do you want to share about how things went from there?
So there I expected to come home, and I expected to be similar to the first year.
Aha.
That I would come home and yeah, and I'd feel a bit strange for a while and it would become assimilated. And it felt like that was going to happen. And I came home and
Yeah.
I still, because I did have a devastated reaction to it.
Yeah.
Um,
And before you go
so
here, actually, there's one other moment I remember, which was at the end, we were doing acknowledgements and no one asked you to acknowledge them,
yeah, yeah,
which drove up more of the
yeah, yeah,
devastation, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, that happened. So it was sort of like, it was running the show. Would that be fair?
Yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh.
I think what was, just going back to the retreat though, what was interesting that even while I'm having this reaction, I'm still having my leadership developed. And it's sort of, for me, just being able to talk about what's going on, even though actually all I wanted to do was run away and hide.
Yeah. You'd taken some real ground. Like I remember
Yeah.
you were able to sort of, it was not easy by any stretch. This was a very challenging time for you, but you were able to sort of like speak about it, distinguish it, let people see you in this. Whereas, maybe the first year you would have just been out the door probably, or like in your casita or whatever.
But I would have just shut down and not said much, I think.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you come home, you're like, all right, I know, it'll start to assimilate. This is how it'll go. And
it didn't. It would die down for a bit, and then the devastation would come back up again. And this went on for 6 months almost.
Yeah.
And like I say, what it did, I think it brought up a lot of grief and sadness that I hadn't dealt with, or I thought I'd dealt with, because like I say, grief comes in waves. And when I think of sort of perhaps the way my life had sort of developed, there wasn't the opportunity to be able to sort of express and deal with this grief. So I spent the second half of the Forge sort of in and out of grief and devastation.
Yes. And I, you said like, I thought
it sounds a crap advert for it.
It's a terrible testimonial. And we'll just cut this part and use only this. You were saying how like, you thought you dealt with it, and you probably had at the level at which you could touch it. And then you kind of broke through to the next level, and there's a lot there, right? A lot built up to feel and to be with. And so
with the frustration of keep going, this should be over by now. And of course I'm getting frustrated with myself and and seeing it as something that's getting in the way of my development. When it was the development.
It's always the way, isn't it? It's so annoying in the moment, like, oh, I need to be over there because then I would be doing the work. It's like this is so I would love to hear like where you are now relative to that, and then just like your some of your journey to get to where you are now.
Okay, so where I am now, I had a really clear what we call breakthroughs. That was the result of being able to allow that stuff to come up and allow the grief to come up, and eventually I surrendered and just went, okay, I will take all the support I can get. So I took extra support from you and Bay, because I'm very much like, I can do all this by myself. It's fine. And it's like, oh, I don't want people to see the inner workings of my mind, sort of thing.
Yes.
She says, letting it all out on Facebook.
Totally.
And so if you think some of that process as well was about me being hard on myself and, like say, being critical that I'm not further along or not where I want to be. And then the breakthrough I had was in self-love, and I'd asked for a breakthrough in love, and I say self-love, but it's the belief, and it's a really hard one to be able to express to other people, but it comes up in my clearing a lot, and I know it's one that a lot of people have, so I'll share it. And it was the belief that I'm unlovable in some way. I've had toxic relationships, I've had toxic friendships, and I've just gone, this is all to sort of do with me, and what do I need to do? Who do I need to be? What do I need to have to make me lovable? And it was through sort of getting the extra support, but also allowing the grief out and sort of more access to who I am. It was just like, actually, I don't have to do anything. Of course I'm lovable. And it's sort of like, I knew that intellectually, but I could now sort of embody it. I could be it. I could be lovable, rather than just think you don't need to do anything to be lovable, because it didn't. It didn't work.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's almost infuriating. We become resigned because we're telling ourselves that so much, but then who we're being underneath is like devastated, a doormat,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
that thing that can't come to the surface. Yeah, and you took on some therapeutic work as well. Like
I
you
did.
really
Yeah,
embraced a lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
support,
I was
right?
like, okay, I surrender. I'll
Aha.
get some support. And
Yeah.
and some of the therapeutic work was is almost like it's not being able to express emotion and have somebody there seeing it, because I live alone. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm coming back and I'm dealing with this all by myself and sort of thinking there's something wrong with me. And
Aha.
and then when you see a therapist, it's like, actually, no, this is all a natural process. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind
And
of,
I can support you with it. Yeah.
yeah. Thank God.
Yeah.
Great. 8 hours we're booked for right now. Good. Okay, here it goes. Yeah, you kind of uncorked something in that retreat, and
Yeah.
then it's
Yeah.
like a lot to come out. And I would imagine there was times when you wanted nothing more than to like just put it all back in the bottle. Like, why did I do this? What have I
Yeah.
done? I've broken
Yeah.
myself, whatever. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And having to sort of just try and hold on to a thread of trust and hope. I can remember saying at one time, no, that's it. Hope is all gone. I
Uh-huh.
was struggling to see a way out of it,
Yeah.
or just like it just felt never ending at that time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so on this side of things, are you glad you walked through that process?
Totally. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because it's sort of like now it's like I knew I was hiding a level of sadness from other people.
Yeah.
I didn't know how much. I didn't
Uh-huh.
realize it went quite so deep. But yeah, totally that access to believing that I'm lovable. And along with that belief is all the stuff around I'm being worthy, being good enough, because that's all sort of tied in together. The other thing it's sort of given me access to, and something that I'd sort of forgotten about myself, is how sensitive I am, and to just be okay with that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, almost to revel in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And this is part of my journey now, is discovering the beauty and the gift in that sensitivity, rather
Yes.
than trying to hide that from people as well.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Love it. Um, One of the things I really acknowledge you for, like you've described, like going from an intellectual understanding of lovability or all of that stuff to like really being it and embodying it. One of the ways I just witnessed you take that on was at the end of this year, you were very clear you needed some time, like
Yeah,
a bit of
yeah,
some downtime release, but then wanted to come back the following year in the Forge. And just you asking that to me really occurred like, oh, this is a woman really acknowledging her process as opposed to like forcing her nose to the grindstone, or like I have to, like I don't want to miss out, and therefore it doesn't matter how I feel. Like it's coming out. There we go. The
yeah.
headset's
And
back.
and and that's sort of starting to realize there's times when I've sort of forced myself, but because of that sensitivity, actually, I'm somebody who just needs to be aware of that, and sometimes need a little bit longer.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? We
yeah, yeah,
become, in this work, we become less and less armored. And the thing I find so cool, speaking from my own experience, is like the more armor we have, the more we tend to be like a highly sensitive person. Like it turns out I'd like cry really easily. I've always known that about myself, but it was only like weird commercials it could get through, and like just very sensitive. And I'd created all of this armor to protect myself from the world. It's just a
yeah,
lot to be with.
yeah. And I was going to say, over the last few years, that it has sort of been leaking out, and I'm sort of like, what's going on? There's something wrong with me. Yeah,
Aha, aha. And you're like, oh no, I'm just really attuned
yeah,
to the world. I'm
yeah,
really plugged into
yeah.
it. Uh-huh. Beautiful. Um, Anything else you want to share before we start to wind down, Ruth, about your journey, about anything along those lines?
Um, I think that you asked me whether it's worth it, and I would say totally worth it. I'm knowing the other sort of people in the forge, and we're all on our own journey. Um, and I was going to say, don't let, yeah, if something could come up for you, that has a huge impact, or you have a big reaction to, but that is just part of the journey as well.
Mhm.
But I'm the only person, as far as I know, who had such a big reaction. Just trying to reassure people if they're thinking of coming
Yes.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you really have like been a leader in so many ways. And it's sort of like I've had these experiences with ayahuasca too, where I'm just like, the medicine's like, well, you're gonna have a harrowing night. And I'm like, okay, got it. That's gonna be how it is. Okay. And like you really, you know, this lineage of medicine, the medicine of transformational coaching, you've really like, and leadership, you really leaned into it. And it's like, great, Ruth is going to be one hell of a leader. And so we're going to forge that leadership in a very, very fiery forge.
Yeah. And I was going to say then the other thing I think I want to say is that I can lead now from being me with that sensitivity, like with that empathy. Whereas, you know, well, I suppose some of it has evolved over time, but very much you believed you had to be a certain way to lead
Yes.
people, and very much that motivational. Oh, you know, come on, let's run
Uh-huh.
around and follow me.
Me, I never feel
That's
afraid.
like, yeah, that's not my style.
Yeah, no. And it's exhausting.
It is,
Exhausting
yeah,
trying to tell people and ourselves that we're not afraid when we are, that we're not sad when we are, that we're happy when we're not. It's exhausting and it sucks and it breeds resentment.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, fuck you for believing this story I'm telling you. Fuck you for me having to, you know, there's a lot of fucks involved, not the
And
good
that
kind.
you're teaching other people that they have to be like that,
Yeah,
when, you know, there's only
exactly.
a certain proportion of people who are like that naturally. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks for sharing all of this, Ruth. I want to acknowledge you for just like the joy and the love and the tenderness that I'm really present to in your being. And as I always do, I really want to acknowledge you for your leadership and your courage. Like you just always commit so fully to like the path, to the journey. And like when we first met, there was almost like a timidity, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And it belied the ferocity that I feel in you. And not a ferocity like an angry tiger, but like the just the best model of feminine ferocity, you know, like just love, unconditional, pouring into the world, and like the ferocity that can come from that. And so thanks for sharing here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so openly and beautifully. And like thanks for all the work you've brought to the forge. And then thanks for being our first registrant for like not this year but the next year. Like it's just another example and model of like the leadership and the commitment, and like you really walk this path, and it's such an honor to get to walk it with you.
Yeah. And thank you and Bay for my transformation.
Well, we're bystanders
Or
for the most part, but
supporting
I
it. Yeah.
appreciate that and I receive that
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So where do people, if people want to, because you coach, right? You're a
I
coach.
do coach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
people want to work with you, where do they find out about you? Where do you put your art? Where do the people get
Okay.
to
So
have a
you
taste?
can find me. Most of my art goes on my Facebook page, which is Own Life Coaching.
Own Life Coaching.
Or you can find me. I put a bit on Instagram as well,
Uh-huh.
which is Own Life Coach, I think. Or you can find me on either of those just with my name as well.
Uh-huh. Ruth Arnott. And do you have a
Ruth
website?
Arnott. Yeah. I don't have a website now.
Screw websites. They're a fad. They're going out of
Yeah.
style. Your Instagram's Own Life. Is that right?
It's Own Life Coach.
Oh, Own Life
And
Coach. You
my
took out the
Facebook page
ing.
is Own Life Coaching.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, let me see if there's anything I want to share before we wind down. We have a few spots left in the Forge. So if this conversation or any of the conversations we have inspired you or terrified you in a good way, reach out to myself or Bay. You can put a comment below and then I'll follow up with you. But if this sounds like something that might be interesting to you, let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it. Definitely follow Ruth, especially you said you're starting to share a little bit about this journey as it's unfolding for you. Is that right?
Yeah, and the embracing sensitivity, but also the sort of learning not to people please while knowing that I have this devastated doormat survival mechanism, which is
Uh-huh.
interesting. Yeah.
I love how you say it with a smile now too. That's radically different. So if you can relate to any part of Ruth's story, definitely follow her work. Because she's sharing and she's got a lot she's distinguishing. This is really valuable stuff. All right, everyone. Oh, there's a couple, I think Seth asked a question. I just want to make sure I answer. So Seth, you asked, is there a method I can use to try and find my survival mechanism? So I believe you're in accomplishment coaching, so you don't have to worry about it. They're going to teach you all about this. I think in my book, Who Do You Think You Are? I also mentioned this. And if not, come join the Forge, because we'll support you with that there. And then it'll be a 2-year process, and it'll all be worth it, as our testimonial here indicated. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you again, Ruth. I love you. It's such a treat to get to spend this time with you. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.